All right, welcome back. Thank you for staying tuned to Daybreak. And of course, you can always engage in our discussions as we get into the paper review. Our SMS line is 22422. Hashtag is Daybreak, at Trevor Mbija, at Wahiga Mwaura, at Zinzi_K. And we'll be reading your feedback throughout the program. Before we take a look at what's in the papers today, let me introduce some of our panelists. Others will be joining us a bit later on. We have Honorable Kipruto Rapkirwa, a former cabinet minister. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning. And also David Osiani, public policy analyst, many other titles, but we'll stick to that one for now.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
And
Trevor Mbija. You want me to introduce you?
Go there.
Tell us what's in the
Let's take a look at the front page of the Daily Nation. Dam scandal, Uhuru cancels 22 billion tender. In adopting the recommendations of the team, he set up to probe viability of controversial dams. President faults Kimwarer and clears construction of Arror Dam, but at half the price. David, what do you make of that situation?
This is when we are fighting graft.
There's an opening sentence there.
All talk and no action counts for nothing. To go back, reassess the value of that dam construction and find that it was convoluted by over 50%, and taking action on that is what you call fighting graft. Because all these years, you know, we want to fight graft. Golden bag ikikuja, bado inalipwa tu. Anglo leasing comes up, it's still being paid. And so I really need to congratulate the president. Now this is fighting graft, and it should continue. We should go back to assessing many other things. Had we done this with the SGR, we would have saved the country upwards of 100 billion. Had we done this with many other projects that have gone afore, we would have saved this country hundreds of billions and cumulatively trillions of shillings. And so I just have no other way of congratulating the president for being this bold, because for you to do this, you're going to step on toes. The interests that got the prices there did not die along the way.
But the argument then is also it's too little too late, because now some of the money was lost, in as much as his deputy says the money was not lost, but some of it was lost.
The thing is that whereas you may not have so much ability to rescue the money that has been lost, I think there's still a window to try and clamp down on things, including everything and anything owned by the perpetrators of this graft case. You forestall the possibility of theft again. It is not meaningful for you to say that now this one has been signed, let it run its full course, when you know that there have been games played with the budget of the allocation towards this. And so, yes, we may not be able to arrest the past, but it is good to be able to deal with the future.
Honorable Kirwa, are you as optimistic as Osiani? Osiani is possibly one of the best days of his life.
Well,
he says corruption is being fought properly for the first time.
Yes, I admire his optimism, but but there are a number of things that we need to ask ourselves. Who are the officers who got involved? It's not just the treasury CS. There must be many other people who are involved in the tendering process, if there was tendering at all. And therefore, we do expect that the ball will start also rolling on those individuals who are culpable of getting involved in such a situation. The second issue is that I hope the lenses that they used to look at this particular dam issue are the lenses that are nationalistic. They are not lenses that are coming from certain section of the public, because already there are ripples on the ground that possibly some certain section of our society is only doing it for the sake of expediency. Remember, if they were able to roll out a program of a dam that has been envisaged about 28 years ago, so many things have changed in those 28 years, and I would have expected some new feasibility study could have been undertaken before rolling out the dam, whether it's Kimwarer or Arror. Finally, on that particular issue, we hope the money that has been paid out is going to be recovered. Otherwise, it's going to be a very big loss to the people of Kenya. And also, who are the culprits responsible for the payout? And how are we going to expedite the matter so that at the end of the day, we are not only talking of cases and cases and cases without making them conclusive.
Yeah. With your experience in cabinet, when you look at a project like this that had gone through to a particular stage and still uncertainty over where it actually was because there have been arguments over it was halfway through development or not at all, what does it take to cancel a project of this size?
Well, it takes the courage of the president, the way Oceania said. But there is also the more important issue. No amount of money in the extent of 1B or even 28B can pass without the approval of the cabinet, which means the cabinet was ill-informed at the beginning of time for that project to have been sanctioned. And this therefore means that the president needs to do a bit of housekeeping so that anything that is passed, and no minister is going to make a decision on his own.
Does he need to do soul searching? Because he was in that cabinet. He would have been in that cabinet.
He was the chair.
He was the chair.
Yeah. In fact, there's no cabinet. At times when you talk of a cabinet meeting chaired by Dr. Matiang'i, it cannot be a cabinet meeting if the president is not there. It is a subcommittee of the cabinet. So he was the chair, and therefore if he chaired and he was the cabinet sanctioned this particular project, then everybody is guilty from the beginning of time.
So who's fooling who here? Because then if the cabinet was there and he was the chair and they approved it, and now they're saying this committee report says that there's no reliable feasibility study. Didn't they know this earlier on? On which feasibility study did they allow the project to go on?
Yes. You may not have all the details, but
but usually, let's say if I was the minister in charge of either devolution or water, whichever minister brought the paper to the cabinet, you present to the cabinet, and cabinet is supposed to be a clearing house. And any other minister can also question, say that at the end of the day, all issues will have been considered before the cabinet does approve anything. This therefore means either people glossed over the issues or there was negligence on the part of the cabinet. And
the entire cabinet.
The entire cabinet.
Because they were in that room.
Yeah, they
were in the room, and they sanctioned. And therefore, we cannot just blame part of the cabinet or a minister in the cabinet. We must also say the president needs to do, in Waiga's words, soul searching, to ask himself, where did the rain start beating them? Remember, I've said before, the emperor, during the dark regime, before he was overthrown, he was called that this minister is corrupt. By the 8th minister, the dark regime came and told him, where were you when all these things were happening? This therefore means we have come now for you, because if 8 ministers are all guilty of corruption, where were you when all this happened? That is how the emperor was removed in Addis Ababa about 40-something years ago.
David, do you see a disconnect in the executive? Because the deputy president says no money was lost. Now the president has cancelled one of the projects.
Again, I mean, as former Minister Kira has alluded, these people may not have been fully aware. You know, there are games that are played that in a cabinet session, unless the president is outrageously a genius, it is impractical for him to understand the nitty-gritties of everything discussed in cabinet. Because usually they'd be covering 3 or 4 broad topics in a cabinet session. The president has entrusted his appointee, the cabinet secretary in charge, to ensure that these things are done. It is not him who will do the research, of course. However, you would expect that the president has a litany of advisors who would look at these things before they come to cabinet, who will advise him, who will either gain concurrence with the ministries and the cabinet secretary in charge. So there seems to have been a disconnect. Either the cabinet secretary entrusted with ensuring that proper research and utility of funds was done, or the presidential advisory team failed to go through the proposal for these dams, see through them for what they were, which was a corruption facade, and comb it out and just flag it down. Now, since all that was not done, we are not going to go into the nitty-gritties of was money lost, was it not lost. It's as obvious as it gets. I think the deputy president, when he said no money was lost, may have been misinformed. I bet his stand right now would be a bit different, because I bet both of them concur that to an extent some money was lost, and that the action of the president is the best way to save that money for other sectors in this country that so badly needs that money.
That so badly needs that money. So on the same day that State House is releasing this press release, the president has received the report and has decided stop Kimwarer, Arror continue, and so forth.
Yeah.
He was meeting the Kibra candidate.
Mariga.
McDonald Mariga.
Well.
Do you see any coincidence in the timing? There on one hand, a team that has spoken about don't fight these projects is at State House to take photos with the president, which we also in various WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the president is effectively dealing a blow to a section of his party that has called for those projects to continue as they are. Any coincidence there, or for you they were two completely different events?
I wouldn't want to read more, but I think if at all there is any coincidence, it was for me a coincidence. But should there have been any communication for us to get there, it was that the president is bold enough to say, I tell you what, I have done this action and I have no qualms staring you in the face and declaring it to you, should you still hold the previous stand that there was no money lost, or that this should go on. Should that be the case, just know that I have made this executive order to cancel the whole thing. But I don't think that the two issues merge or converge at any point. I bet the president was doing his job as the leader of Jubilee Party. This is a Jubilee candidate. And the two are diametrically opposed.
Exclusive.
Yeah.
Diametrically opposed.
Has his seeming endorsement done anything to change the situation in Kibra? Do you think a meeting with the president would
I am unsure it
better
cures,
your chances?
I am unsure it cures the perception that Mariga is the deputy president's man. For the common pedestrian, because what has gone out, how it has seemed, is that Mariga is the DP's man. He's his Trojan horse in Kibra to try and, test his weight in Kibra, whether he can secure some significant percentage of votes. I don't think the deputy president hopes to win that seat. But the president's endorsement, I bet, doesn't change that much. It doesn't change that much.
Okay.
That is from an outsider perspective.
Honorable Kiro, what do you think of it? Does it even change the handshake dynamics now? Because people are saying that he shouldn't really just endorse someone, or this is separate parties, has nothing to do with the handshake.
Well, the handshake is totally independent of the two candidates, with the one of ODM and Mariga, for the simple reason that the handshake is broader than just a by-election. And I do not have the gift of imagination like Oshani, that I can now go into the deep lenses of what it means for Mariga to be a candidate in Kibra.
Yeah.
The way I see it is that Jubilee has been fighting a lot of battles inside. And at this stage, I think the president wants to become the father figure of the party, allowing the candidate to run, because whether it's Ruto's candidate or is a Jubilee candidate is neither here nor there, because the deputy president is the deputy to Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the president and the party leader of Jubilee. So I think what Jubilee is trying to do, and I think they are getting to the realization that none of them stands to gain if Jubilee is going to be a split house. But as far as I'm concerned, I cannot say whether Mariga will win or not, because I have run 7 elections myself. I've lost 3, I've won 4. And at times you lose when you least expect that you're going to lose. Mariga, I think, has realized that he may not have the gift of the gab. Now he's going the Kenyaji way, from village to village. And that may endear himself to a number of voters. And voter dynamics are arrived on the eve of the moment. So the moment is on the 7th of November.
Yeah.
So anything can happen in between.
Okay. I don't want to let you go, Honorable Kirwa, before I pick your brain on this Ugali crisis.
Yes.
We've sat in this studio, I think, for the last 3 years. Every year at some point, we'll sit down with you and ask what is going on. It's looming as maize harvest drop. What shall we eat is the question the Daily Nation is posing. This projected shortfall set to open the floodgates to imports and make the country's staple food too expensive for citizens.
And yet NCPB still says they have enough reserves. So you keep wondering what is going on. Who's fooling who here?
Yeah, traditionally there are almost four types of food storage. or food presence in Kenya.
Yeah.
The first is, of course, the storage by National Cereals and Produce Board. The second is storage by the farmers. The third is the harvest for that particular year. And the fourth, and one of the most important, is cross-border business between us and Tanzania, or between us and Uganda, and in some limited extent, southern Ethiopia. Now, these form the bulk of the maize that we expect. Now, you cannot, in isolation, say because there is depressed harvest from Kenya, therefore there is a food crisis. Ask yourself, how much did we carry over from last year? How much is the farmer still storing because of a number of challenges? And finally, what do we expect from Uganda and Tanzania? Now, the danger about this is to create a situation where 1 or 2 or 3 million bags will be imported, and they will come at the time we are harvesting, and it will depress the prices of the maize that we have. It happened last year. That's why we started by selling maize at 1,400 a bag of 90 kilos. And now it is 4,200 in many parts of Kenya. Now, this kind of maize dynamics is something that we must guard jealously. I'm not saying importation should not be done, but should be done at the right time. Now, the reasons the officers have given and I've read through are just for the purposes of PR. The truth of the matter is that there was mishandling of the maize situation by the government itself. They delayed in taking in the maize from the farmers. Usually it's supposed to be taken in about November. Now they went almost up to January before they took in the maize.
And that then leads to post-harvest losses, which is
a lot of
post-harvest.
Yes, it's usually about 30% to 50%, depending on where you're storing them. It also allowed farmers to sell maize at depressed prices because they needed to pay fees, they needed to deal with other things, and therefore they had reduced income. That's why there is reduced acreage under maize this year. It also allowed uncertainty on the part of the farmers, and they did not see the need to go back to plow under maize. So all these are factors that we must genuinely interrogate if we have to be sustainable in terms of food production. Otherwise, anything else is going to be just a gradual and a disaster. I remember one of the moments when I was Minister for Agriculture, I was under a lot of pressure to import maize. And even the president believed that I was wrong. And yet I was proven right almost 2 months later. Because there are also businessmen who want to cash in at such a situation, and they will say we want duty waiver. And once that maize arrives, it will depress our local prices, so the same businessman will get that maize from the farmer. At the end of the day, the farmer gets negative results as far as his harvest is concerned. And the government loses more. My take would be, let us be jealous about our own farmers. Let us deal with cross-border business, which is about 2 million bags from Uganda and about 1 million bags from Tanzania. But let us have our own internal dynamics right.
All right. I think no one would put it better than the previous CS for agriculture. But this is what I have to say, Wahiga and Trevor. Just as you did your absolutely scintillating and fantastic Masai Mara story, I want you to walk into these ministries and find out who does this research. What is the basis of such research that projects that we will need so much or to import so much? When people tell you that we are going to harvest 33 million bags, what is the basis of their research? Which department does it? What influences some of these researchers? Listen, this is the way you cook a crisis in future and cash in on that crisis. You start by putting it in the minds of Kenyans that we told you sometime in 2019 around September that we will have a shortfall of 14 million bags. When you get to March, you try to now actualize that gap. There needs to be an investigation. When we say that we need to import, for example, sugar of so much amount, who says it? What is the basis? How have they done their research? Is it verifiable, as all researchers ought to be? What is the level of rigor in each research? You know, generalizability and all those things I know you all know. When you will go to the crux of the matter, then you will meet the cartel at that point. That's where the game begins. The game begins in first playing with the figures, making it look academic, so that we buy the fact that it has been researched that we will need a projected amount of bags imported from other countries, and yet the reality may well be that there will be no shortfall in this country at all. The person who ends up in a problem is our own farmers, who we need to guard selfishly and jealously. If the National Cereals and Produce Board are going to buy from our farmers, and they are going to take care of the produce well. I remember in this very studio discussing how the National Cereals and Produce Board had not taken good care of the maize that were at the NCPB, leading to a loss of 3.2 billion shillings. Because the maize then had to be thrown. It was now toxic. If you're going to have those levels of negligence without punishment, and then you're going to have a department in the ministry that plays around with figures, and we all buy it, and yet we have, you know, talented people who should be the third or fourth eye of the citizens like you are, then it is a disservice to the country. So go to the bottom of this, and I am persuaded that you will find
the cartels face to face.
The cartels face to face. And if you confront them next year, you will not hear this story.
All right.
I can hand over that one to you.
You want us to add the maize can?
Right. I don't want to add anything to that. We take a break.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back now, we get into that conversation on how to handle retirement, how to plan for it. There's a proposal to lower the age. The pension bill will skyrocket. It's at about 110 billion, 20,000 people retire every year. More than 40,000 who've already retired have not even received their money yet. How do you plan for retirement?
And of course, what social safety nets do we have in society to take care of the vulnerable, whether the unemployed on one side or the retired and unemployed on the other end? That's a discussion we'll be having on the other side of this break. Stay with us.